Welcome back to the channel. Thank y'all for hanging with me on this Thursday. So this is a good time to throw a swim bait and a good time to throw a swim jig, depending on the water clarity you have in your lake. If you have a little bit less visibility, I like to go to that swim jig. And you're going to find on lakes with less visibility, you're probably throwing that around cover. And then on more of your clear lakes, I like a swim bait because it's going to be more open water fishing. But what I need to tell you is something that's very important. And I'm going to use a couple different lakes. I'm going to use a couple different times a year to explain this point because this will help you become a better swim jig fisherman. Because if you think that you can just pick it up and throw it for 5 minutes and then set it down and move on to something else, you're probably not going to do very well on this bait. So what I want to explain when it comes to swim bait fishing in your clear water situations or swim jig fishing in a little bit dirtier water is the mentality, picking that thing up and throwing it all day. But when can you pick it up and throw it all day is the most important thing. So yesterday's video, I talked a little bit about how you get in this time of year where there's just fish spread out. Now let's talk about the fish being spread out because that's probably going to help you become a better swim jig fisherman. So there's specific times of the year, post spawn. Everything is leaving those spawning flats. They're swimming 10 different directions and they're just spread out. You will also find that this time of year is a really good swim bait, swim jig time because, again, you have fish that are spread out. They want to go to the backs of the creeks, but maybe the bait's not there. So they start swimming else places. They're going to get in their winter pattern at some point. They're going to get near that main river channel. So you just have fish that are in limbo. That's when the swim jig dominates. Or you may have a specific fishery where there's just endless good-looking cover. The fish could be anywhere, but they're not everywhere, and you have to cover a ton of water. And when I think of lakes like that, Florida, Florida lakes are typically surrounded by a grass line, Kissimmee grass, reeds, then there's big pad fields, and everything on the lake looks great. There's no offshore structure that's going to keep a population of fish in one general area. You just got to get on that outside line and just cover as much water as possible. The Mississippi River up near La Crosse, same type of situation where everything looks good, but obviously fish can't not be everywhere. So you see the swim jig dominate there. You pick it up, you fish, and then once you start finding bass, you're typically finding an area that has a group of fish. And the same thing goes for any lake that really has a ton of water willow and not a whole lot of visibility. Those fish are going to live shallow. They're going to use that water willow at some point in time in the day. You just have to cover a lot of water to find the fish. So that's why a swim jig is going to dominate on places like the Coosa River, the Alabama River, all those places, because you have an endless amount of water willow. Same thing goes to the Mississippi River. Cover in Florida, everywhere. Cover, everything looks good, and you don't have anything specific to go fish. You just start covering water. So what I will say about this is when you get to November, typically, that's what your fish are doing. And here's the big difference between now and the month of April. The month of April, post-spawn, bass are moving into new areas. They're getting away. They've been on the beds. They're getting out. They're heading towards the main river channel. They want one big meal. They're hungry. Post-spawn is just a weird mood for a bass. They're typically going to eat something that they don't typically eat the rest of the year. They're looking for bluegill. They're looking for gizzard shad. They're looking to get back to their fighting weight. And a big swim bait is perfect for that. The other side of everything I've talked about so far is covering water. They're spread out. You got to cover a ton of water, and that's something you can do with a swim bait. You can reel it somewhat slow, but still cover a lot of water because it just has drawing power. It's big. It's in their face. That's what they're eating. So it's all about big swim baits in the post spawn. This time of year, you can still probably catch some bass on a big swim bait, but I like to downsize to a little swim bait. Threadfin shad, smaller shad are probably what they're looking for. They're hard to catch. And on days where you don't have suitable fishing conditions, clear skies, no wind, they're hard to trick this time of year. They've been through the ringer of baits and they're hard to catch. So I go down to this little swim bait. Every company makes a little swim bait, a 1/4 ounce head. You can maybe even go down to an 1/8 depending on how slow you're fishing it. But this is a tool where you can cover a ton of water. Now, I still throw a swim jig quite a bit this time of year. You have a little bit more color in your water. They're probably not going to bite. this little thing. But if you have super clear water, it hasn't rained a whole lot, the places where you want to fish, like the backs of the creeks, they're going to be really clear and they're going to be hard to trick. Those are high percentage places where a lot of fishermen venture. You need something very finesse. So this is a big fish bait, believe it or not. Swim bait, you put it around big fish, you're going to trick them, and they've seen a lot of bait. So let's talk a little bit about how I'm rigging this up, because it's small. If you put it on too heavy of a rod, you're probably going to straighten that hook out. So I like to throw it on a spinning rod. Your 7-foot medium action. You could even throw it on a cranking rod, which is going to be fluorocarbon on that cranking rod. Spinning rods, I like to throw it on braid with a 12-pound fluorocarbon leader. It's fairly finesse fishing, even though you're throwing it in shallower water. So that's basically what I do on the tough days. And again, what I talked about yesterday, the whole benefit of the swim bait is when you start catching them on it, you don't got to worry about anything else. Those other 12 rods that you have in your boat, you don't need them. They're redundant, because the bites that you're going to get on a swim bait are going to be quality. You're going to catch numbers on the days when it's on, and then you don't have to necessarily worry about all that other stuff. That's a magical thing about bass fishing. When you can catch all your fish on one bait, that's living right. That's good times for bass fishing. And that's what a lot of guys don't like about forward-facing sonar, is that when they get to the lake, they know they're going to catch them shaking a minnow, and they know that's the one bait that they're going to use, and they don't have to venture too far out of that. Maybe a jerk bait, maybe a fuzzy dice, but you don't have to go through 15 rods. You don't have to go change the baits off 5 of those 15 rods to figure out what you need to use, like typical bass fishing. You're turning it into red fishing. You're turning it into tarpon fishing, where there's one bait. You don't have to stray too far away from that. It's not about the bait. But bass fishing, old school bass fishing, bass fishing that I like, it's about going through the 15 rods. But when you figure out this deal and you get them on this deal, you get them on that swim jig, or like I talked about yesterday, the spinner bait, the buzz bait, you're smooth sailing with just one bait. Pick it up, cover water, throw it all day. And what you will find is when you start catching them on all the other baits, you just don't see quality. You just see a bunch of small fish. There's nothing that you can correlate in between the baits that makes you think, okay, I need to be throwing all these different baits. You start catching quality on a swim jig. That's all you need. And you're covering water. Pick it up, throw it out, and just fish as fast as you can while keeping that bait in the strike zone. And that's a really cool thing this time of year with bass fishing. So fishing stuff, that's a reality, but you can still load the boat with that small swim bait and a swim jig. So try that, guys. Good luck to you, and I'll see you on the water.